All right. Mm-hmm. Let's see. All right. Just trying to get. So you guys are welcome to write up questions. Just a heads up, most of the questions will be coming from the guests themselves. Hey Rob, how you doing? Just trying to work out with Adam. Oh, Adam, you there?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you.
All right. I got a little background noise. I'm on the bus, but I can go in the back if the road noise is noticeable.
It's a little bit noticeable. Yeah. Would you mind?
Okay, not a problem. Give me just a minute. And it might still be some, but considering we're doing a bit of a roundtable, I'll be able to mute myself when I'm not talking.
All right.
Give me just a second. And let's see.
All right. Just waiting on Keith and Stefan.
All right, it should be a lot more quiet back here. Is that better?
Yeah. Oh, that's really good.
Excellent. Yeah, it's get to go to the back of the bus with the cool kids. Actually, I'm in the bedroom in the back of our campaign bus, No Force One.
Oh, nice. Called No Force One?
Yeah. I hope that doesn't need explanation.
No, I get it. I'm just looking it up. Adam Kokesh, finally free America.
That's us. Although that's our old campaign slogan, we've just is kind of slow branding transition, and of course the rewrapping the bus is the last part of that. But now we want to make it live and let live.
Gotcha. All right,
really in the spirit of localization, right? You want to live that way in your community, and I want to live this way in my community. We don't have to be forced into a centralized system. How about that? So how many, this is Tim I'm talking to, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so who else is on the voice channel other than Stefan Molyneux and myself? And Sam, I saw Sue's a maybe.
Yeah. We're gonna be having Keith Knight as well. He's a YouTuber. Also goes by the term voluntarist. Try getting
Cool.
Larry Sharp, but he wasn't able to make it.
Well, I understand in New York, everybody's got their hands either very full or very empty right now. I know what's going on in New York because I watched Trevor Noah's daily social distancing show. I can do an impression of Trevor Noah doing an impression of Donald Trump.
Let me see if we got Keith.
So is there a text chat I can be watching while this is happening? The roundtable discussion, are those people who are generally listening?
Yep. So roundtable discussion is where everyone can just comment as we go on.
Oh no, he's gonna come in here. Kale. Ha ha. Okay, I'm reading Skittle. Thank you. Just making sure. Kale, you don't have to miss me. I'm right here, Kale. He's witnessing the simping. Oh no. All right. Any other good comments here? Does this guy know Stoned Rogan? I do not know Stoned Rogan, but I have gotten stoned with Joe Rogan, which is probably better. Monkey in a wheelchair, been a few days, Cokesh. Well, we're doing a daily. Hey, Tim, are we cool if I vamp while you're getting everybody else plugged in here?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So Monkey in a wheelchair says, been a few days, Kokesh. Well, I don't know what you're talking about, but I appreciate the love. But we are doing a daily live now version of Adam versus the Man, and doing it 7 days a week, as our promotional material says, at least until shit calms down. But we are in the middle of the Coronaphobia Bug Out Tour, and when our self-imposed quarantine is over from our 2 weeks of the last time we were in a crowd where there may have been someone, we are going to be going from San Antonio to Austin to Dallas to Denver, points in between, to Phoenix to San Diego to LA to Vegas, and home to Juniperwood, Arizona, and focusing on media production as long as we're on lockdown and building a bug out team. I got Juniperwood Ranch, a beautiful off-grid community where I have the Garden of Freedom, my little 10 acres of heaven. And if anybody who's listening, and we've been talking about this on my daily Facebook Live, 3 p.m. Eastern, if anybody wants to come out there with us, we're basically planning on bugging out for the next 2 months, living remote, off-grid, avoiding martial law. It's especially true right now that cops are more dangerous than they've ever been. They have a carte blanche in a lot of ways to do some pretty uniquely evil stuff while we're under these stay-at-home, lockdown, martial law, well, they don't call them martial law. They're emergency powers. There's an emergency. Give us more power. So that's what we are kind of just trying to sidestep right now. You know, I consider doing stuff with the bus to deliver food and aid, and there just wasn't a real way that, you know, we could do it without running into all these travel restrictions that we're seeing now. So we're just doing this one round. We're picking up people, picking up supplies. If anybody's listening in any of those major cities or points between who wants to help us out, we're setting up a team down 3 miles of private dirt road. And my property, when I bought it, didn't connect me to a road, didn't connect to any existing road. So I built a road. So if anybody is interested in joining us to bug out or seeing the area with this beautiful off-grid community, feel free to send me an email. I'm watching the chat right now. It's not martial law. Proceeds to enforce the quarantine with the National Guard. Yeah, good point, Scavenger. Yeah, a lot of confusion, conflicting messages, and bullshit. But if anybody wants to email me.
Sorry, let me cut in here, Adam, but I think we've got everyone in here. Just want to make sure. Keith Knight, can you hear me?
I can hear you pretty well. Can you hear me?
Yep, you sound good. Sam, I know you're having audio or mic issues. Are you able to talk? If you're not able to, man, just DM me and we'll try to figure something out with that. I hate to sound like that tech guy, but near the bottom of your device, check and see if there's a microphone button that's clicked. Might be local muted. No, okay, it's not that. So yeah, just message me, and we'll try to figure that out. And then Stefan, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. How you doing, man?
Good. So for everyone, this is our first roundtable. I'm pretty excited about this. We're getting together, a handful of libertarians. I think you guys should know all of them. All four have been on here for AMA before, and they're just going to discuss issues together. So we'd like to start with something that was brought up by Stefan. Generally speaking, what do you guys think would be the appropriate response, or I guess the right libertarian response to a pandemic like we're seeing now? Stefan, would you like to start us off?
Sure. I mean, that question, I think, is broken down into two sections. I'll just touch on one and then turn it over to the panel. The first is, how should we communicate about the pandemic as it stands? Now, I think that there's a great opportunity in the midst of all of this tragedy to remind people of the basic reality that governments have not kept people safe, that a lot of politicians are using the pandemic as an excuse to try and grab more power. A lot of the supposed moralists in the media who've been haranguing and harassing and libeling and slandering us these many decades have suddenly found an enormous blind spot when it comes to holding the totalitarian communists in Beijing directly responsible for facilitating the spread of this pandemic, that people are expecting the free market to step in and solve these issues. But of course, everything is being blamed on the market to a large degree, and it's greed for free things from China, and the idea that the government is going to go and step in and take over industries, as it seems to be striving to do, is a really terrible idea. The World Health Organization has been revealed as not only corrupt, but as massive Vesuvius plant sprayers of disinformation and counter-information. They're saying, masks don't really work. Well, of course they do. And they, even as late as February, were saying that closing borders was not necessary and was actually counterproductive. And the media that's been crying out about racism rather than a very dangerous disease that's spreading like wildfire in many ways through the population, I think it's important to hammer these points home and say to people, look, the government isn't keeping you safe. The media is lying to you. And we have to start looking at alternatives to this massive centralized infrastructure of doom as a way of solving social problems. And this isn't even to point out the basic fact that either a government lab developed this and then it got out accidentally, which seems to be the most likely explanation, or it's actually a weaponized virus that was maybe put out on purpose, but the idea that it came from bat soup is kind of ridiculous. And so let's point out to people that it was centralized socialist totalitarianism, communist totalitarianism, that either directly or indirectly was responsible for the spread of this virus, because China didn't close its damn airports, it didn't close its damn borders, it let this whole thing spread out into the world. And we say, well, maybe they don't want to. Well, they just did. They just closed their borders to people coming in. So we know for sure that they can. So this is an entirely government-created, government-spread, government-facilitated disease. But of course, when people are scared, they tend to run to Big Daddy government as a solution. And we've got to really push back against that nonsense.
All right, so just a point of order here. So for everyone joining in, you guys are welcome to write questions in roundtable discussion, the text chat above this voice chat. Just letting you know, we probably won't get to many of them. I anticipate having maybe 5 questions that we touch on tonight. but you're welcome to write them there, and I will keep an eye on them. And you can discuss with all the other users in roundtable discussion as we go along here. So next, Keith, what are your thoughts on this? How should libertarians address a pandemic like this?
Well, it's one of those sort of trick questions that you often get. What if there's a pandemic? In other words, should we be safe, or what if there's a pandemic under libertarianism? The question should be, if there's a pandemic, would you rather live in a statist society or a libertarian society? It's the equivalent of saying, oh, a bad thing is happening. Therefore, the Church of Scientology has the right to violently dominate millions of strangers and take 25% of their income, and anyone who doesn't abide by arbitrary regulations has to be caged. So, if I'm in the midst of a pandemic, the kind of society that I want to live in is one that allows for the most amount of freedom, to allow the intellectual, natural elite in the medical industry to rise to the top, free exchange of ideas, making sure there isn't an FDA who, according to the excellent work of Dr. Mary J. Ruwart, has killed millions of people literally by forcibly stopping people from making voluntary exchanges and innovating in the healthcare market. I mean, imagine every time you have to, come up with some technological or intellectual argument or idea, you have to get an approval from a committee. Well, of course, that's going to make you much poorer than you otherwise would be. The committee's going to be corrupt. It has no incentive to make sure good ideas get out there. It's much more worried about letting something go through and then it receiving a bad rap afterwards. So the existence of a pandemic does not refute the non-aggression principle. It does not justify a group of people initiating violence against millions of strangers.
All right, and Adam, what are your thoughts on this?
All right, thank you so much, Tim and Sam and Keith. It's great to have you on the panel, and Stefan. Been too long, but grateful to share this conversation with you. Craig in the chat said information wouldn't be happening to such a degree in a libertarian society. I think that's one of the most important things here. I generally agree with Keith's analysis there, that it's kind of a question with a false premise. If you say, how would you deal with this as a libertarian? How would we deal with this differently in a libertarian society? It would be, well, like we're doing now, but without the shitty government parts, without the coercion-based parts, without the anti-free market parts, without the suppression of information, with an ability of society to respond better and more flexibly and quicker, and with accountability. Whatever system we have, a market-based system or a voluntary community government-based system, means that the people in charge are accountable, that there's a demand and a legitimate pressure from the market and an expectation of transparency and accountability. The worst thing you can do with important social decisions is put them in the hands of people who face no consequences for being wrong, namely politicians, but especially bureaucrats, and the people that are turning this into a way overblown crisis. I don't mean to dismiss it entirely. I think it is a legitimate but relatively small, I don't mean in global scope, but in terms of the threat. If it wasn't for government and the media blowing this up, hyping it up, basically so that the banks can rip us all off. That's what this is. It's a financial coup. They announced today part of the plan is to have a merging of the Federal Reserve System and the Treasury Department. So meet your new Federal Reserve Chairman, Donald J. Trump. You look at the $2 trillion, whatever it is now, stimulus bill. They're going to take $6,000 from every American or per American, maybe give some of them $1,200 back. This is a raw deal if there ever was one. And what this reveals is just how fascist Trump can be. He's always been socialist. He has supported so many policies of socialism, Social Security, Medicare, just maintaining the general status of socialism of the United States federal government. But now he is deliberately merging corporations and state. Came out today, asked at his press conference, what about restaurants that are closing? He said, well, yeah, we're going to lose some, but we're going to get them back. They just might be under different ownership. That doesn't put any business owners at ease right now. And what he's talked about in the bailouts is that he's going to have the government buy stock in corporations and take control of them. This is the merging of corporations and the state, the very definition of fascism. They are blowing up a relatively manageable health crisis that if it wasn't for all of this evil crap happening around it, we'd be like, okay, guys, hey, let's redirect some resources. Let's let the free market get appropriate attention to where the need is, to get test kits, to get masks, to get treatment. And this is the other thing that is so tragic about the restriction of information in the situation, is that effective treatments are going to be delayed in their implementation. And I think the death rate, when we do the statistics, when everything shakes out, is going to be lower than anything we've seen. I think we already saw Germany, where they have some of the best statistical reporting and testing. They got it down to 0.3%. So 3 times as deadly as the flu. So freak out 3 times as much as you normally freak out for the flu or bad flu season.
No.
So anyway, that's the answer for a libertarian society, is that however we're going to deal with this is based on cooperative market-based solutions, not on coercive ones. And I think everybody here would agree that that's a better approach than what we're having now, which is allowing the leaders to frighten us into a panic so that they can take advantage of us and further concentrate wealth and power.
So I'd like to, you brought up the bailout. I think that'd be a good next question. But before we move on to that, I think I was hearing Stefan. Did you disagree with something Adam was just saying?
No, nothing in particular. I think it is going to be a big issue. I mean, this thing is nasty. I think that it did come out of a lab. I think it is kind of designed to spread in many ways, and so I do think, given the massive growth in cases that we're seeing, it is a different animal than anything we've seen before. And it is a free speech issue. This is something that's kind of underreported on, in that because China tamped down on free speech, the word couldn't get out to the world.
Yeah.
And so when everyone talks about
Nobody
hate speech and control of free speech, we've got to remind them that it was a lack of free speech that significantly contributed to this pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Here.
Tim, can you hear me?
Yeah. Is that Sam?
Yeah, this
Okay,
is. You can
awesome.
hear
We
me.
can hear you now.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
All right. So yeah, before we
Sorry
move
about
on, what are your thoughts on this, Sam?
Okay, what was the question again? I was busy fiddling with my mic trying to get it to work.
It was about the, coronavirus and how a libertarian society should deal with a pandemic.
I think I heard Adam say that the way a libertarian society would deal with it would be exactly as we are, without all the garbage. And I think he's absolutely right there. I think you're going to find a lot of libertarians agreeing on that, just because that's what we're seeing. We saw over 100 different laws and regulations thrown out the window so that the free market could deal more effectively with coming up with treatments, coming up with vaccines, moving people around in order to help combat this illness. And honestly, anything that we've gotten rid of at this point, we should leave off the table. We shouldn't put those laws back. We shouldn't put those regulations back, because we've proven that all they do is they hamper us in our ability to provide healthcare when needed. Similarly, the government response, the government has gotten in the way every step of the way. You look at Dyson, and they decided, okay, hey, we want to help out. We're going to basically stop everything we're doing. Engineers, let's go ahead. We've got some time. Let's design the new ventilator that we can mass produce to help out in this situation. And 10 days later, they've got a design, and they're trying to find manufacturing resources. And I have no doubt that people will step up and provide manufacturing resources for that, because this is what you do this is what civilized people do to help their neighbors, to help those in trouble. It's what compassionate and caring people do. And if there's one thing that Americans are, we are civilized, compassionate, and caring individuals.
All right, and so obviously related to this, the coronavirus, as I'm sure all you guys are aware, Congress has just unveiled a bailout package. The exact details I don't know about. I don't know if anyone really does know about the exact details, but the general idea is that they're trying to bail out a lot of different companies. I know one of the big ones, just sectors mentioned, was airlines, and they're trying to prevent. I remember hearing that, for example, with airlines, part of the deal is that they're not going to lay off employees for at least 2 months. I am assuming you guys will have a very broad agreement on this, but I do want to ask, what do you guys think about the bailout package? Adam, would you like to start? All right, we can come back. Stefan, do you have any thoughts on the bailout?
Well, I mean, it's wretched. It's terrible. And it, of course, it's covered up the general disasters of central banking and the fiat currency system. Fiat currency system has bled people dry for over 100 years, but in particular since the 1960s, since the really warfare welfare state got going as a dual-pronged fork into the eye socket of Western denizens. And so because money has lost its value, because hyper-regulation has driven so much manufacturing overseas, people haven't been able to make that much money. Now, so what do? We say, well, we can't fix the Fed because, if we don't have the Fed, we can't bribe people with the money of the unborn to buy their votes. We can't fix the Fed. We don't want to fix the Fed. So what we're going to do is we're going to use China to pretend that we're not inflating the currency because China will manufacture and ship stuff to us cheaper. And so the whole export everything to China, to Mexico, to India, to other places is a way of counteracting against the general decline of value of the US dollar. But of course, it hasn't really worked because people lost their jobs, and you've got the whole Rust Belt situation. You've got a massive drug epidemic, a suicide epidemic, an obesity epidemic, all the stuff that comes when people are inactive, bored, frustrated, lonely, and can't get their lives started because they can't get any damn resources under their belt. So the whole system has been messed up, and so people don't have enough savings. Now, part of that is, they just spent a lot of money on useless crap, but part of it is the general economic situation. So people do need to start saving again, but why would you save when interest rates are ridiculously low? So this is another bailout for the existing system. Like the minimum wage is a bailout for crappy government education, providing no economic value to people. So you got to prop up their wages artificially. And so I think it's terrible. And there is, of course, this delusion that if a company goes out of business, the service won't be provided. This thing that we fight against for decades, which is, well, if the government doesn't do it, and the government currently does it, if the government doesn't do it, it can't get done. Like the aforementioned roads that Adam is building with the sweat of his brow and the fruit of his loins. Well, probably just the sweat of his brow. But
The fruit is still catching up, Stefan, but thank you.
Right. So the idea that, well, if the airlines go bankrupt, there won't be any more airplanes. It's like, hey, man, it just means that the existing leadership gets tossed out and more sensible leadership comes in. I have very little sympathy for corporations that have been spending the last 10 to 15 years taking 0% interest loans from the Fed and using that money to prop up their own stock values by buying back their own stock, which disproportionately benefits the wealthy at the expense of the middle class and the poor. I have zero sympathy for them. Boeing said, hey, we'd love this $17 billion. If we don't get it, in other words, or if the government wants some sort of slice of ownership, if they give us that money, that's no problem. We'll explore lots of other options, and there are tons of other options. And the Fed is like, no, we'll give you the money. The government is like, no, we'll give you the money. So this is just a bribe from the existing kleptocrats at the top of American corporations to get money so that they don't have to face the consequences of the fact that buying back their own shares is a form of stock manipulation that adds zero actual value to the economy, but props everything up like, the economy is like Morgan Freeman's voice on helium. It's higher, but it's kind of incomprehensible. So I would say it is terrible, and it's something that should be avoided. But the reality is it can't be avoided because people have no mental framework with which to sacrifice their immediate interests for the sake of a decaying and dying system. We don't have any leaders in the popular media, in the political arena, who are telling the truth to Westerners, to Americans, about how terrible the system is that they're enslaved under. And so because of that, people are like, oh, the problem is coronavirus. Now, the problem is not coronavirus. That's the straw that broke the camel's back. The problem is all the other straws ahead of time. So now people aren't going to sit there and say, well, we have a terrible, corrupt system that steals from us perpetually, that buries us under debt and unfunded liabilities. And it's not the coronavirus, but this is a great chance for us to really reshape what goes on in our country. No, they say, oh, well, the coronavirus made me lose my job. Government owes me money. I'm going to go and get it from the government. So there's no mental framework by which people might accept the sacrifice of a wrenching change. So that's why it's good we're having these kind of roundtable, get these ideas out there at least a little bit.
All right, yeah, Adam, you brought this topic up. What are your thoughts on this and the bailout?
Well, I want to share a post from my friend Tammy Nichols, who's a Republican state rep in Idaho. She said she has some friends looking into this. So just to give people an idea, if you look just a little bit under the hood of this thing, how offensive it is. $100 million for NASA, because, well, who knows why. $20 billion to the USPS, because, why the hell not? $300 million to the Endowment for the Arts, because, screw it. $300 million for the Endowment for the Humanities, because, you know, no one even knew that that was a thing. $15 million for veterans employment training for when the GI Bill isn't enough. $435 million for mental health support. That would be a lot of suicide hotlines if that was actually going to help with veteran suicide. I might not be quite as offended by it, but I know it's mostly going to get wasted. $30 billion for the Department of Education Stabilization Fund. $200 million Safe Schools Emergency Response to Violence. $300 million to NPR. $500 million for museums and libraries. This is a clear ripoff that has nothing to do with the virus or the health threat. And what they're using to get people to accept this is a bribe. We're going to give you $1,200, and then we're going to send you a bill for $6,000 next year. You put it in those terms, you go, oh, wow, yeah, this is really insane. Why are we falling for this? Are we in such a desperate position? Are we also overcome with this mob mentality? Give me my little piece of the pie, screw the rest of us. But this idea that they're going to spend $6,000 of stimulus per American, but we only get $1,200 each? Or why not give us all our money back and let us decide who to bail out and have corporations and government agencies crowdfund their own bailouts? Well, they can't have that because that would ruin the point. And I know it's really tempting to support a bill that's going to put $1,200 in my pocket now, but I can tell what they're doing. This is a terrible deal, and we are going to be left holding the debt. The government is going to force it on us. Our children are going to be paying this for decades if we don't, as I believe that we can with the Libertarian Party. We can really fundamentally upend the system. We can overthrow the entire fiat currency. I say this is a really huge opportunity for an awakening. You know, if Trump supporters aren't ready to vote Libertarian after this, I don't know what offensive big government thing he could do that would drive them into the welcoming arms of us in the Libertarian Party. But you know how this works. When they create more money by printing, it lowers the purchasing power of the dollar that you own, and that is how they rip you off. Small businesses are going to get further choked out with this bailout, with this favoring of big businesses. That money, that comes from somewhere, and the people who are profiting off of this are going to keep getting richer while the rest of us keep getting poorer, unless we take this as an opportunity to turn the tide. I want to see this turn into a buy Bitcoin movement. I want to see this turn into a we got to reject the duopoly movement. I'm optimistic because of conversations like this. I think they're, in a sense, going too far with this. Oh my gosh, we can panic the people and we can all jump in. There's probably not some master conspiracy, but when something like this happens, and we see this phenomena of a spasm of statism ripoffs, they all kind of feed off each other. It's kind of like a feeding frenzy on the people by governments all over the world. But they're doing it in the age of the internet. You know, they got away with all of the things that they used 9/11 as an excuse for. Are they going to get away with all the things they used the coronavirus for? Maybe, but at least if we pay attention and we spread this awareness, we can stop it from happening again. And what scares me more than the virus, more even than this response, is that governments are developing a fear template to whip people up, to rip us off.
All right, and Keith, what are your thoughts on this, the bailout?
Excellent point that Steph brought up when he said that it's basically a bribe once Boeing started looking at its alternatives. The same exact thing happened in 2008 when the crash was sort of beginning. Tim Geithner and Hank Paulson sat down with the biggest bankers on Wall Street and said, everyone has to take this bailout, whether you want to or not, because if only some do, and the market sort of reorganizes itself, first of all, we won't appear to be the heroes. And second of all, the market will just absolutely flush those other companies. Their stocks are going to drop. Oh, they're taking bailout money? Well, this must be a terrible company. So this is the typical thing that the state does. They either cause the issue or stop a solution from coming through, and then jump in as our saviors, as Harry Brown always said. Government likes to break your leg, gives you crutches, and say, without
Yep.
us, you wouldn't be able to move. So,
Yep.
I mean, and just look at how this creates the other things they claim to be against. We need government to protect us from monopolies. By the way, let's give huge corporations billions of dollars and lower interest rates to the point where they could take out loans at less than 1%. And of course, they're also causing people to have no incentive to save when there's these microscopic interest rates. Well, why would you save when the dollar is losing its value? You might as well constantly be putting it into items. This lowers, or this rather increases the time preference of the populace, stops them from thinking in the future, makes them have less kids, and allows the state to be pretty much the sole arbiter of where people look to for a solution. I mean, even the leftists of the left are saying, "Oh, Trump needs to be in charge of this." Does Trump have like a degree in medicine or something? Why are you looking to a politician when there is a virus? That's just so backwards in every way. But that's the mindset that they got us in. People are uneducated. Oh, increase the size of government. There's bad guys overseas. Increase government. There's a drug problem. Increase government. Some people are sick. Increase government. They just sort of get you in this mind control. So it's the great non sequitur fallacy. Run amok. I oppose the bailout because it is funded through taxation, which initiates violence against peaceful people, and printing on what is a coercively funded monopoly granted in 1913, the Federal Reserve. So I'm against it practically and in principle.
All right, and Sam Rubb, what are your thoughts on the bailout?
Okay, politicians lie, news at 11, right? Like we didn't know this was coming down the pike. And you have to give credit where credit is due. It took the government some time, but they managed to innovate and actually come up with something that makes payday loans look good, right? This is one of
Yep.
this is one of the worst examples of capitalizing on fear and fear mongering that I think we have ever seen. You take a look at this bill, and I'm actually thinking, leading up to this, we had things like the Earn It Act. We had things like, oh, hey, let's make sure that we ram through some gun control here. There were some additional bills that kind of got floated through, and I thought, oh yeah, that's where they're trying to get these in under the radar while everybody's distracted, and then they come out with this abomination. And I mean, in the eyes of whatever deity you commune with, and man, this thing is horrible. This is how bad it is. We had a local news reporter, and I mean, you figure, talking about the news, they're generally on the government side. They think that big programs are fantastic. They'll report on how the government's, and she got on and read through this bill and talked about some of the absolute ludicrous things that are jammed in there. I mean, Adam talked a little bit about it. You can go through and read through it. This should have been one. We should have had two bills. We should have had one that says, hey, if you've earned less than whatever, right, we're going to give you whatever taxes we took from you last year. We're just going to give those back to you. Or bill number two, if you're really in hard shape, then we're going to give you a mechanism by which we can give you a little bit more to help you. That's all we needed, a 2-page bill. We did not need additional structure set up. We didn't need extra institutions set up, because you know how government works. Anything that is set up in this bill is here forever. It is not going to go away. Even after the pandemic is over, even after they're done handing out money, there will still be a 20,000 person organization sitting around collecting paychecks, doing nothing, because the whole crisis is over. But you can't get rid of it because it's a government program now. This is a sea change. This bill right here, not because it's politicians doing what politicians do, but because there is so much pushback against it. Not from party leadership, not from the Democrats or the Republicans. They love it. They love the pork. They love the smell of the smell of it. But from the American people, I mean, they are looking at this, and the people that would benefit from this, air quotes around that. I'm seeing people who would benefit from this looking at it and saying, this is a bad deal. Yeah, I need help, but couldn't we do it some other way? Is there a reason why 5 times what you promising me is being given to Boeing? What's Boeing have? All they have to do is not fly their airplanes for, or not make airplanes for a little while. And the airlines, well, they're still flying actually, and they can cut back their businesses. Don't they know how to do this? Don't they have some cushion? People are starting to wake up. I think this bill is going to mean an awful lot to the Libertarian Party. It's going to mean an awful lot to third parties in terms of connecting with people and showing them just how bad government is.
All right, so we do have only 2 hours allotted here, and we're more than a half hour through here. So I want to move on to another question, but before we do, would anyone like to chime in on something someone else said? All right, so next topic we want to bring up, I think it's pretty close to a few people in here. I know myself, Adam, and Sam are all military veterans, and Adam actually brought this up, wanted to discuss veterans issues. Is there a particular aspect you wanted to discuss, Adam?
Well, with my platform of taking the federal government through a bankruptcy process that leaves us with 50 independent states and up to 562 sovereign native nations as the first step in localization, there's a lot of privatization that happens along the way. And obviously in the traditional political discourse in America, privatization has a very bad reputation as we're going to take public resources and give them to the hands of people who are donating to our political campaigns. But when we talk about that in libertarian terms, we mean putting those resources in the hands of people who have a claim to them, people who have an interest in them. And in terms of environmental resources, localization, where we can transition to that, full privatization by getting down to community level government, it's a beautiful process. But with veterans, the benefit is even more immediate. So when I say privatize the VA, I mean spin it off from the federal government entirely. Give every single veteran in America one ownership voting share. We have the technology. It's not complicated. We can do this on a blockchain if we have to, and have a secure system where you put the veterans in charge of the VA. You get the bureaucrats, the politicians, the pharmaceutical companies out of the way, and the drug war, of course, so that we have the freedom to pursue medication that we know works, like obviously cannabis, which is really more in the realm of symptomatic treatment for PTSD, but more on the scale of cures, MDMA and psilocybin therapy that is currently illegal, to be able to deploy that, and who knows what else when we get rid of those government restrictions. If you do those two things, give the VA to veterans and the drug war, I guarantee you will not have 22 veteran suicides a day. And this is just such and I think it's an underreported statistic overall, but it is a national embarrassment that has gone on for too long. And I think a lot of libertarians kind of shy away from these kinds of issues. You know, we all have sympathy for veterans who are a special class of victims and victimizers for the state. But we're not saying, hey, that's an excuse to steal from people. Well, if you spin off the VA, separate it from government taxation, you're going to have a way of veterans coming together to take care of each other. You have a mechanism that we have today preserved. We have those resources preserved, the institution, the channel. And I could talk for hours about my personal experiences at the VA, being given suicide pills, all of that stuff. But, when you hear Medicare for all, you should be hearing VA for all. And right now, it's a horrific system that really contributes to this phenomena of veteran suicide. So if we can just apply libertarian principles consistently, we see that we have a better answer than any of the old parties do, who, obviously don't care about veterans. They have the VA there so that it looks like they care about veterans, so they can keep convincing people to enlist. If they actually cared, it wouldn't be like this. And it's not the people who work there. The actual healthcare providers are great people for the most part, who generally make sacrifices to work at the VA. A lot of them get paid less as a result of working for. Now, some get better benefits packages, and I'm more concerned about the bureaucrats in this case. But let's cut them out of the picture. Let's streamline this thing, privatize it, and really show respect for the people who want to make those sacrifices to take care of veterans.
All right, and Sam, you served in the Navy, if I remember correctly. What do you think about reforming the VA?
This is where I'm going to do something very unusual politically and say, yeah, what he said. I agree. This is one of those categories.
Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, Adam nails it. He really does. The VA should be privatized. He hits all the big issues. He understands them, and that's why I think if I end up getting the nomination, if I am elected president of the United States, Adam Kokesh, I would absolutely be coming to you and saying, hey, I need someone to lead Department of Veteran Affairs, and I want you to do it. And I think that probably every other libertarian running would feel the same way. Hey, this is where his heart is. This is where his passion is, and this is something that we need to do. It's just been like you said, it's an embarrassment. These are men and women that whether you think that wars are legitimate or just or not, or our actions overseas or not, these are men and women who, in good faith, because they were told that this was a good thing, joined the United States military because they had a desire to protect our country, that they were misused, that they were hurt, that they were wounded, that they were damaged in the course of that, puts an obligation on us to take care of them and to take care of them as best we can. And the VA right now is not the best we can. We can do an awful lot better, and the free market, as Adam described, can do an incredible job and take care of them the way that they should be.
All right, so Stefan, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, although I have been live streaming my takedown of the demons in Doom Eternal these days, I do feel that I lack the specific military experience to talk about this with any degree of authenticity. So I will defer to the vets and say, good arguments, and more of them would be great.
I do want to say I've been watching a couple of those. I am absolutely amazed at your ability. It's an achievement when you take a nap, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
When you have to lie down on the job, it means you've done so well that you get nap time, and it's on the side, and then you get resurrected after you rested.
Well, I want to give Stefan a shout out. There are few living intellectual legends of our movement who have had the deep impact that he has, and he has been very influential on me in my sort of formative libertarian years, and getting deeper into the economics and philosophy in particular. And Stefan, I want to give you that due credit for your influence in my words.
Oh, thanks, man. That's very, very kind.
All right, and Keith, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I will definitely second what Adam just said there about Stefan's work. I made a book summary of his two great works, Practical Anarchy and Everyday Anarchy, for people who are interested in libertarianism. Took me like 4 hours to get through both of them. Really excellent work. As far as the VA
shoot
goes,
those over to me, and I'll help publicize them. I think that'd be great.
Yeah, definitely. So the VA, it's an interesting segue because so much is related from coronavirus to bailout to the VA. In every case, the state is causing an issue, veterans being wounded because they frankly fought in wars based on lies, whether it's the Iraq WMDs. Afghanistan was planned September 4th, according to a Rumsfeld memo, National Security Presidential Directive 9. there is the Syria lies. There's Gaddafi giving his troops Viagra. There's Saddam's babies in incubators. There's the Gulf of Tonkin. There's the McCullen memo lying us into Pearl Harbor. There's Colonel House's book, the intimate papers of Colonel House, saying, if we get the Germans to attack the Lusitania, well, then we can have Americans go into war. There's the sinking of the Maine. So again, government creates the problem, has all these veterans that they obviously, of course, they don't take care of the veterans. There was an article on CNN, of all places, 307,000 veterans die as a causal result of the VA not getting them health care fast enough. But just as Kokesh said earlier, well, why are you putting so much power in the hands of people who pay, no price for being wrong? So I look at this sort of like a libertarian. There are two ways to achieve your ends: violently and voluntarily. And I'm more than happy to help the vets out with things like Wounded Warrior Project. I talked to a lot of veterans when I worked for a political organization and tried to introduce them to the ideas of voluntarism. And one of them actually started veteran voluntarist page on Facebook. So that is my general response to the VA question.
All right, and I just want to follow up on this with a specific question here. I'm not sure how you guys would answer this, but I do have a generally good feel here. I know most of the people in the room are anarchists. They believe in the dissolution of the state. In some way, you can of course disagree with this, but some people would say that the state or the collective, I know you're going to cringe at me saying that, but the state or the collective has incurred an obligation to veterans. These are people who've, done their years and gotten a pension, or who have been injured in the line of duty. After, if you guys do want to, dissolve the state, would you guys still want to make sure that those people are taken care of? I know with Adam, your proposal, and Sam agree with that. I know, like Keith and Stefan, you guys kind of deferred, but is that something like? I guess it's more of a philosophical question here.
No. I'm not sure if this is the exact answer you're looking for, but in terms of, that there is an obligation there. There's a lot of different obligations. Does the American voter have some responsibility? Do people or at least who voted for the policy, do the politicians have some responsibility? Does the corporation of the federal government itself or the DOD bear that responsibility? It's one of those nebulous things. I think what's nice about my plan is that it immediately divorces the VA from the system of taxation. And if we get to give it an endowment as we dissolve the federal government from funds that are existing sitting there with the Fed, I'm going to be looking into that, at least funding a transition to a voluntary organization. But I think as voluntarists, we want to say, look, if the VA is going to survive, it has to find a voluntary way of funding itself. I don't think that's going to be a problem. The American people, by and large, recognize that most people in the military stepped up, put our lives on the line with good intent. And the American people are so generous. And the average working American gives half their, or has stolen from them, half their salary every year. That's insane. I mean, imagine if the average working American's income doubles. How much more generous are we going to be? I think the idea that sentiment could be properly expressed through the free market is the best way to address that.
Okay, and do you guys all agree with that?
Sure.
Stefan? All right.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, it's a tough call about who pays for the disasters of propaganda. I have a lot of respect for military men and women who signed up based upon lies, and part of me says, well, we'll just tax those who provided those lies. But of course, those could be hard to identify in any meaningful way.
It's impossible not to untangle.
Yeah, I think, you could say, oh, well, CNN, NBC, ABC, MSNBC, otherwise known as make sure nobody blames China. We could, put taxes on the people who put out the we could put taxes on people who put out the propaganda, but to me, if there's a bill for closing down the military-industrial complex and having it turned to a purely defense agency under a free market, I'll pay that bill as long as it's like one kidney, not two.
All right. So, change of pace here, but there was a question I found really interesting here. One user wanted to know, well, I mean, everyone in this room, as far as I'm aware, is someone that would be considered a right libertarian. What are your guys' thoughts on?
No,
No?
I reject that. I understand that people want to apply labels. I think voluntarist or libertarian transcends the left-right spectrum. Larry Sharp says a libertarian is someone who says you can be as liberal or as conservative as you want as long as you don't force it on anyone. If you agree to the don't force it on anyone part, your aesthetic preferences of what you want your society or community to look like are kind of irrelevant and do us a disservice when it comes to uniting as people who want to fight for freedom together. You know, I could call myself, well, I'm a homestead libertarian, or I'm a, you know, high desert mountain libertarian. And it's like, who cares? You know, if you're a libertarian, you believe in the non-aggression principle, that should be enough. And I generally reject the imposition of the left-right spectrum onto that.
Okay. So, the term libertarian socialism is, you know, it's one that is anti-capitalist, of course, and they believe in distributing power more widely among members of society. Do you guys believe that you can be a libertarian and anti-capitalist? I guess we'll start with Adam.
Yes and no. There's a lot of semantic silliness that you kind of have to untangle, so I'll try to answer without getting into all those weeds. I believe that you can have voluntary socialism, and some people would say, well, if it's voluntary socialism, then it's capitalism, because you're respecting self-ownership and you know, the libertarian concept of property rights. And you know, we still have to respect that you can do that and create a system that people would call socialism. And I don't think any of us would object to someone creating a voluntary system and calling it socialism to the point where we're gonna invade their compound and put guns to their heads and say, you can't call that government or you can't call that socialism because it's voluntary and that's our word. You know, it's really kind of silly. And I put this in terms of localization. I'll step back from that particular semantic issue for a second to say, yeah, I'm of Jewish descent, and I see, you know, Jews will not replace us, and tiki torches is a viscerally disturbing thing. But I can still say, as an ethical person, if you want an ethno-state, I think that's disgusting. I would never live there. I think it is wrong-headed in so many ways. But I respect your right to form an ethno-state if you do it voluntarily, if you don't force it on anybody else. This is the modern equivalent of, I disagree with what you say, but I will fight to the death for your right to say it. And to the flip side, you're a gun-grabbing socialist who wants to live in a nudist commune in the woods. Fine, I'll take my entertainment value from a distance. I don't want to live there either, but I want you to have that right.
Okay.
Sorry, just a moment. I would just like Adam to tell us a little bit more about this this nudist thing. Go ahead.
Well, we have a different policy at the Garden of Freedom at my place, but it's a capitalist nudist commune, not a socialist nudist commune. It's the difference between someone like me walking around naked and someone like Michael Moore walking around naked.
I think I'm going to go a little under column A rather than column B. Okay.
Thank you for the alley-oop.
All right. So I lost the thread here.
So can I
go ahead?
If I could just jump in on that. This is where it's vitally important to be able to understand concepts and definitions and principles. Because when you say, are you for capitalism? It's like,
yes.
Okay, well, capitalism is when someone has a bag of money and then there's buildings and then managers and the stock market. It's like, well, okay, really?
And a guy with a top hat and a monocle.
he's got to have a monocle, or else it's syndicalism.
It's not
obviously.
capitalism. Yeah.
What you could do is just start by defining communism as Karl Marx did in 1848. Communism is the abolition of private property. Socialism is the institutionalized aggression against private property, leaving us with capitalism, a social system based on the explicit recognition of private property and voluntary exchanges between private property owners, meaning contract. So, this is much more of something we have to focus on with understanding definitions, maybe using a term like free market or voluntarist. In other words, you can acquire things voluntarily, or you could homestead them. The first person who acquires land, mixes their labor with it, has a better claim to it with regard to others. Because if that first person doesn't have the right, then no one can ever do anything new. And you're morally justified in mixing your labor with virgin land, so to speak. So you cannot be a libertarian socialist in the sense of advocating genuine socialism, the logical following of anything that AOC or Bernie Sanders supports. What makes socialism immoral is violence, not the sharing, not that the people who are the employees there daily also control the board of directors. If that's all done with voluntary contract, well, hey, put the business owners or who they think the bourgeoisie are, put them out of business with better working conditions, better products, and any other method of voluntary exchange. But you cannot be a peace advocating violent person. But if by socialism you mean you believe people who are in a factory should also have a stake in what is said, well, then that's a voluntary exchange, not incompatible with libertarianism at all.
All right, and Sam, do you have any thoughts on this?
Actually, coming from a more right viewpoint into the Libertarian Party, kind of took me by surprise that there was such a large lib-soc contingent in the party. And I actually think when I did my AMA earlier this week with you guys, I mentioned that I grew up in Western Pennsylvania. This is where I live. I come into contact with the Amish fairly frequently, with Mennonites, with Quakers, and the idea of a group of people wanting to live in a communal society and yet have the government stay out of their business is actually a fairly something that I grew up with. It's not novel. It's not a strange idea. I think when you do get into definitions, when you do start talking about things, you can see some hand waving going on, and I hate it when you see people redefining words to mean exactly what they mean, and you're not allowed to apply more traditional meanings or understandings to them, because what I see in society, when people talk about, oh, this is what libertarian socialism looks like, I see that there's an economy there. It's you cannot get away from an economy. You cannot get away from an exchange. You cannot get away from a market. In a libertarian socialist society, you're looking at a gift economy. You're looking at where you exchange presence, where there's a free exchange of things, but there's still a market going on there. There's still an economy. So I don't think there's any getting away from that. I think that's something that naturally comes out of human interactions. I think trying to define it away or say that it's a bad thing is dangerous, because it leads down the road of violent imposition of principles. And I think at least in the libertarian sense, what I've seen so far is libertarian socialists who honestly would like Larry Sharp says, as Adam brought up, they would like to live their life the way they want to live, with a bunch of people who feel the same way. And fantastic, you go ahead and you do your thing, we'll do our thing. I would love to see them be able to say that, hey, we're a bunch of hippies with guns. That's where we live, whether we have clothes on or not, and we can do our thing, you can do your thing. But we still sometimes are going to need to exchange goods. exchange property. And that's where I look at it and say, unless you have a completely socialist society, you're still going to have markets. And even if you have a socialist society, whether you want it to or not, you're going to have some sort of market, some sort of economy. So.
Okay. And is there anything you'd like to add, Stefan?
No, I mean it depends. Yeah, as you say, if you define socialism as voluntary, then it's just a frat or a family or whatever it is. So that's all fine. If people want to not exercise property rights, I've got bigger issues in my life to deal with than people who want to share a pen. So the exercise of voluntary rights is purely voluntary. And if people don't want to do it, that's fine. Now, the moment they say I can't do it, then we have a fairly significant problem, and that's generally. But because people think socialism means people being nice or people sharing and so on, I think it's worth sort of enveloping that definition and then extracting the coercive element out of it afterwards, just so we don't really blow people's minds by them thinking that niceness is somehow immediately associated with coercion.
All right. So our next question here, we're about an hour in. We got another hour left here. And just as a heads up to everyone here, this is scheduled for, of course, 1 more hour. Afterwards, I am playing.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm getting quite a bit of clattering in the background.
Oh, is that Adam? Do you got some background noise?
I'll watch it. I'll watch my mute button. Thank you.
All right, I think it's still going, bud. Unless that's someone else. But yeah. So we've got another hour left. Afterwards, I am playing the people who are going to be around just to have a open discussion with users and basically continue the discussion once the roundtable is over. So welcome you guys all to stick around and enjoy that. But next question we got here is one that Keith wanted to ask. The question is, what is the biggest misconception about libertarianism? Keith, what do you think is the biggest misconception?
Yeah, I would say the biggest one of the great things is getting people to start thinking in principle and not just association terms like, well, that's the thing that Ron Paul likes, and they start criticizing an individual rather than a principle that applies to 7 billion human beings for all of eternity. They start criticizing one doctor in Texas. I would say the biggest misconception is if they oppose something, they oppose that thing in and of itself rather than the method of violence used to achieve said thing. For example, I don't believe the Catholic Church should have a right to force to force parents to fund the Catholic Church and have any compulsory church attendance laws. Now, someone might say, but there won't be any morals. You'll have one moral theory. We'll have the 10 Commandments. You'll have the Torah. Everyone's going to go to war with everyone all the time. And then they're going to worship Muhammad. Therefore, you have to fund the Catholic Church and people have to abide by their rulings. Well, no, you can absolutely voluntarize that sort of thing. I just take that principle and apply it to the state and every other organization. So saying I don't believe theft is justified in the name of helping the impoverished, well, that does not mean I'm against helping the impoverished. Maybe another big one is opposition to equality. I actually see libertarianism as the true embracement of human equality, the belief that no person or group of persons has the right to initiate violence. Now, if there's inequality in looks or popularity or height or exercise ability, likes on Twitter, those things, there's a million different ways we can arrange society, and there's always going to be natural hierarchies, but it really is about freedom, the ability to pursue your happiness so long as you don't initiate violence or aggression against other people, and the equality aspect of this applies to everyone. But what if you get in a group and people vote in the group and the group has badges? That's completely irrelevant. So I'd say that our opposition to violence means we're against that thing in and of itself, whether it be helping the poor, education, healthcare, etc., and claim to not care about equality and just worshiping at the feet of the bourgeoisie because we don't believe the state has a right to initiate violence.
All right, Sam, what are your thoughts on this? What is the biggest misconception of libertarianism?
Okay. In all honesty, coming at it as a Christian and talking to a lot of Christians who are Republicans and Christians who are Democrats, trying to convince them that that the Libertarian Party is somewhere to come and somewhere they can hang their hat. One of the big misconceptions is that that libertarian means libertine. That just because you have a choice, that you must choose a certain thing. For example, I honestly have no desire whatsoever to partake of cocaine or heroin or anything like that. But I also believe that it is immoral to tell someone who is not harming someone else that if they snort, shoot, do smoke, do whatever to enjoy themselves or to alleviate pain, if they were self-medicating. um, I feel that I have no right to threaten them, to throw them in a cage, to kill them if they resist me. I feel the same. I feel much the same way about sex work. I don't agree with it. I think it erodes the soul. I think it erodes the spirit. I think it takes a toll on the mind and the body. And you know, and yet I can look at someone who is engaged in that profession and say, you know what? I don't agree with what you're doing. I would not choose that for myself, but I have no right to threaten you, to throw you in a cage, or to have you killed in order to enforce my point of view. And it's really kind of eye-opening expressing that sometimes to like I said, to Christians who, fellow Christians who think, oh yeah, if you're a libertarian, then that means you must be, a hard drinking, pot smoking, womanizing, visiting the prostitutes, burning down buildings and throwing babies in the ocean sort of type, right? Because you're just crazy. No, we're not. We just don't feel that it's right to hurt other people, even if we disagree with them.
All right, and same question, Stefan. What do you think is the biggest misunderstanding of libertarianism?
Well, I mean, it's all of the semantic traps that the enemies of freedom have set up, to the point where, like, anarchy means regularly swilling Molotov cocktails and having sex with pigs in a graveyard. So now it's all about
What? Well, he doesn't? I'm in the wrong room.
We'll have to take this chat offline. Anyway, but no, it's the semantic garbage that is thrown up, that people think you want to be a libertarian because you want to do degenerate, horrible, wasteful, hedonistic things. And it's just one of these unfortunate things about language, that libertarian happens to be close to libertine. And everybody thinks you want to be like Oscar Wilde on crack, riding a horse off a cliff and stuff. And so reminding people that it is a deeply moral and oddly conservative approach. And by conservative, I don't mean like yucky Republican stuff. I just mean it's conservative insofar as the conservatives have a big focus on responsibility, right? Moral responsibility comes out of Christianity, and personal responsibility comes out of libertarianism. And we are kind of fighting the headwind, or I guess we're fighting the down current, the strong current of people who want to evade responsibility. And the way that you evade responsibility, which ties in earlier to the bailout conversation, the way that you avoid responsibility is you screw up badly and you run to the government. And that's really a terrible thing to do. It keeps people infants, it keeps them toddlers, it keeps them, worse than teenagers. You're like in the latency period or something like that. So reminding people that there is no genuine happiness in life unless you have responsibility. You can have hedonism, you can tickle your endorphins, you can do all that kind of stuff, but that's all going to decay pretty quickly. It's going to leave you miserable. And there is no fundamental happiness or joy or pride or self-esteem in life without taking responsibility. But everybody wants to avoid responsibility. Like little kids, everybody, you get your hand in the cookie jar like that. Oh, I'm taking a cookie for my invisible friend Baphomet or something like that, right? You don't want responsibility. That's kind of like a kid thing to do. So reminding people that responsibility is something that we have a love-hate relationship with, but every time we surrender to avoiding responsibility, we lose what it is that makes us human. Animals don't take responsibility for stuff. You see all these ridiculous videos or funny videos, of dogs, whining and hiding and refusing to look at their owners when they've torn the couch to shreds, like me with a Marxist argument. And so I think just reminding people that it is a deeply moral, it is a deeply human, and it is a deeply adult philosophy, and it attempts to yank people out of the eternal childhood, the endless childhood of dependence on coercion, and it's a fundamentally non-hypocritical. The idea that you take from the personal and apply to the global is what allowed science to advance. Everything falls, we fall. The earth falls around the sun falls around the galaxy, just like the apple falls from the tree. You take from the personal and you move to the universal. And it's the same thing with ethics. There's very few people who will openly be overjoyed about using violence to achieve what they want in their personal lives. And yet somehow when you get to the state, it becomes not something that's evil, but something that's necessary and good. And so it's, what I love about libertarianism, about voluntarism, is you don't have to be a hypocrite. You don't have to do these mental gymnastics of saying, well, violence is really terrible in my own personal situation, and I would really abhor any use of violence and blah, blah, blah. But the state, without the state, we're going to have violence is necessary. Like, that's just, to me, that's a real brain squid, twisty Ashtanga yoga from hell pretzel world that I just can't stand being a part of. I just like that clear, simple consistency. And so, yeah, it's consistent, it's adult, it's mature, it's responsible. And it really is the only path for people to achieve any kind of sustainable happiness. And I think that aspect kind of gets lost along the way.
All right, and I feel really guilty about this, but I lost track. There's one person I didn't ask.
I guess it's me.
Okay,
Me.
go ahead, man.
I really want to say thank you to Stefan for that last point, and I do think that is hugely underrepresented. I talk about, in the political context, libertarians are the adults in the room, coming in cool, calm, collected, and at a very deep level, trying to pull people out of that arrested development, childish state of mentality, all of our childish inclinations that survive in modern society to adulthood for so many reasons I won't unpack. But to the question, I think there are a lot of different layers at which there's a misconception of libertarians. Most voters are very, very low information, and they hear the word libertarian. Most of them don't know the definition of the word libertine. These are people who went through a government-run school system, not big vocabularies. A lot of them just don't even know the difference between the word liberal and libertarian. They think a libertarian is a type of liberal, or it's some offshoot of the Republican Party, or is that even a thing? So at the superficial level, there's just, really basic misperceptions based on ignorance. You go to the next level.
Or maybe, sorry to interrupt, but maybe it's because it's how close the word libertine is to latrine. Maybe that's the mental that people say.
Yes. And what Sam and Keith said, what Sam and Keith said was so important at that next level. People who have taken a little bit of an understanding of libertarianism, but then you get all the way down to not quite fully understanding it. And once you get to understanding all of libertarianism, then there are misperceptions because you come to realize that we're basically right about everything. But the one thing that I think pervades it, I don't know if this is the biggest, obviously, judging relative size and misperceptions is a very subjective game, but I think this is one of the very big ones, and it's the one that bothers me the most, and I think is the most important one for us to overcome, is that we are doing what we are doing to be right, to be powerful, to be political, to be serving special interests, or any of these things in opposition to the truth about libertarians, which is that we're motivated primarily as activists to make the world a better place. We want to serve humanity with knowledge and philosophy and love and compassion and empathy. There are some who describe themselves as libertarians and just want to be right about everything, but even they, by being active, are doing it to make the world a better place. And it's kind of going in line with this being a political movement as a misperception. It's not. This is the ultimate anti-political movement, and we lose when we play their game and accept their framing and argue issue by issue instead of uniting people to take issue with the fact that people from thousands of miles away are trying to force their will on everyone. And that's really what I want to see front and center in libertarianism is that attitude of love and compassion and service to humanity. And even if you don't like my sort of, hippie language here, well, then just in a positive capitalist way. We want to create value. We want to maximize efficiency and potential so that more human needs can be met, so that we have more stuff, more value, more high technology, more services, more saving medical procedures. We want to make the world a rich place for everyone.
All right, so just a heads up, Adam, I know you're on the road, so probably not much you can do about this, but you cut in a little bit. I think I was able to hear most of it, and has everyone else able to catch most of that?
I get it. I mean, obviously, we're all fairly used to hearing Adam slurred, but I think this is no. I'm just kidding. I'm getting some of it, and it's peaceable. But yeah, if you can get to a better spot, better.
Okay. So let's see. Next question we want to get to here. So there's been a few questions about whether or not, I mean, I guess we can take this multiple ways here. Whether or not you consider yourself a utilitarian. And so I guess the way I'd want to pose this for you guys is, do you see libertarianism as fundamentally a morality-based system, more deontological, or do you see it as utilitarian, or do you see it as both? Stefan, would you like to start us off?
Well, I really dislike the utilitarian argument. The utilitarian argument is looking backwards, but imagining you're looking forwards, right? No, nobody knows how a free society is going to play out in any detail, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You know, ending slavery, nobody knew exactly how it was going to play out. It doesn't matter. Ending serfdom, nobody knew how it was going to play out. You know, just extending basic rights of property and self-defense and free speech and so on. I have no idea how it's going to play out. And we can't make decisions based upon this fantasy world of infinite prediction. Look, if anybody was good at predicting things, they'd go make $1 trillion on the stock market, right? I guess by shorting these days, right? Maybe that's China. But if people were really good at predicting stuff, then we wouldn't have free will. We wouldn't, they'd just be super rich. So I really try to avoid consequentialist arguments. Well, what's going to happen if this bad, like what if a bad thing, like what if you have a free society and then a government just comes back? It's like, okay, well, what if you get a tumor removed and it comes back 20 years later? Do you not want those 20 years? Anyway, so this idea of consequentialist stuff, I really try and wrestle people back to the principles. Is violence good or is violence bad? Like if you've got a woman locked in your basement because you want to be her boyfriend, whether who's she going to date when you free her is not the fundamental question. The question is, why on earth do you have somebody locked in your basement? That's the wrong thing to do. So I find utilitarianism turns into kind of a discussion of Klingon biology. Like these uber nerds out there are like, well, Klingons, here's where the kidney would be, and based upon the pictures I've seen, here's where their liver would be, and so on. It's like, yeah, but they don't exist, and the future doesn't exist. And trying to figure out what the consequences are going to be of the universal application of basic moral principles is like, that should not be how you make basic moral principle decisions. You shouldn't just make decisions based upon consequences, because anyone can make up any consequences they want. And so it tends to turn into a kind of rank relativism. And then you end up saying, okay, in 350 years, well, come on, like nobody has that kind of knowledge. And the fact that we can't peer into the future, it's funny, because we dislike central planning, partly because people can't see the future and they can't figure these things out. But consequentialism and utilitarianism is even more insane in terms of vanity than central planning, because you're saying, here's what's going to happen in a free society over the next 100 or 200 years. If somebody said in a centralized or communist economy, a socialist economy, here's the demand for iPads in 150 years, we just say, well, you're crazy, or even 50 years, or even 5. So I'd say stay away from the consequentialist stuff. And it doesn't really move people. What moves people is the fist being brought down from human interactions.
All right, Keith, what are your thoughts on this? The utilitarianism versus, I guess, what was the term we would use? I know Stefan, you you ran a philosophy channel. What's the other term we would use in contrast to
Consequentialism.
in contrast to consequentialism?
I'm sorry, was that a question for me? I lost track of that.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So hold on. I think the two aspects are utilitarianism, that which creates the overall greatest amount of utility, and then non-consequentialism, which is regardless of the consequences, I believe X, Y, or Z.
Okay.
My approach to this is, well, if you are a libertarian, or I'm sorry, if you are a utilitarian, well, if you want to maximize happiness, I think you should definitely want a society in which people are allowed to practice, pass, fail, profit, loss, try to achieve their happiness, so long as they don't initiate violence. I think that is a great way to achieve the utilitarian end. When people are more free, they make more voluntary, satisfactory exchanges when there's not a group of psychopaths threatening violence against them at every turn. So I think utilitarians should absolutely embrace the libertarian principle. And again, what Stefan said about the psychic game that people love to play. It's like, okay, tell me about your neighbor's life over the next 20 years. And the average person will say, well, I don't know. He just lives next to me. How do I know him? It's like, okay, well, tell me what billions of strangers are going to do decades from now. It's like, how many people thought Trump would be elected, or the USSR would fail, or the Democrats would love Mitt Romney for voting against President Trump? You saw none of that happening. You didn't see Apple or Microsoft or Amazon or LimeWire and MySpace going away, or Blockbuster. So that is much more of a hurdling tactic or a stalling tactic. Let's play the psychic game and think about what's going to happen in the future. Well, regardless of what happens. And you can just use any other group in place of the state. I think the Koch brothers should violently dominate all of us. And unless you give me really good arguments as to what's going to happen in the future in the absence of Koch brothers violently dominating us, then you have to submit to my reasoning. Well, that is so ridiculous. I'm not a utilitarian because it makes no principled moral claims. As Robert Nozick said, well, if we found out that some people or even a machine grasped much higher utility from us than we experience from our lives should be lived by pleasing this machine or this royalty, etc. So I don't value utilitarianism that much. I try to take it on a principled approach.
Sam, what are your thoughts on this?
Okay, utilitarianism, the idea that some action is right because it benefits a majority of people. There are plenty of things that you can do that will benefit the majority of people. I mean, or a larger majority. I could say, you know what? I've got a bunch of money in the bank. I know that we're going through some hard times. Let me go ahead and spread that around and help my community. I'm going to go ahead and give them. That is definitely an action that benefits the majority, but that's a voluntary action. The problem that you have with utilitarianism, I think, is that everybody thinks that they know what the right action is. Everybody, and you fall into the trap there of saying, you know what, there's 6 billion people in the world, and I happen to be the only one that really understands what the problems are, and I'm going to essentially play God and say, well, it would be better off if this happened here, or if that happened there. And the problem with it is, once you get out of the realm of I think this is what it should be and start working to make it happen, you have two choices. You can convince people that you're right, in which case you have a free society voluntarily coming together to solve a problem, or you can say, okay, here's what I need to do. I need to start forcing people to do what I want. And of those two, one always is the easiest solution. Unfortunately, history bears that out. Trying to you know that you talk to libertarians, you get a libertarian and a mirror in a room, you're going to have an argument within 5 minutes, right? Getting people on the same page is hard. Telling people, I've got a gun, do what I say, is easy. So that I think that's the problem with utilitarianism. Once you start talking about get outside the personal, because everybody's a utilitarian personally. I want to maximize my happiness. I'm going to make the individual choices for me that do that. Once you start saying, and I think you should do this, you either have to convince them or you end up forcing them, and the forcing is the easiest action, and that's just a bad path to head down.
Okay, and Adam, same question to you.
Yeah, I think it's another dangerous false dichotomy where utilitarianism is really put forth as a rationalization for bad utilitarianism. Just like anything else, applying the scientific methodology to social issues, we're not trying to find principles for principles' sake. We are deriving first principles in order to have the most pragmatic outcome. Principles are pragmatic. That's kind of the point. So when someone says, I'm a utilitarian, not a principled person, it just means that you're bad at both. You've given up principles and you've given up applying consistent, rational, scientific methodology to your utilitarianism and saying, okay, look, there's this one little benefit that I like here and that's good, and so I can throw out principles, and it's really just misguided, whereas principles provide you with the most practical answer when you apply them properly. And I think if you apply the scientific methodology that most of us would in achieving, what you would say are the deontological principles behind libertarianism, those provide the best results. So this concept of utilitarianism as something that is different than principles, it's really just an excuse to get people to give up principles.
Okay, so we've talked a lot here about principles. Now I'm a little bit curious about more strategy. Like obviously when we're trying to achieve a more libertarian world, there are things we might believe in. Sometimes, I mean, of course, tell me if you guys disagree with this. Sometimes there are certain things you might want to focus on, or certain kind of strategies you might want to take to create a more libertarian world. What do you think is the best strategy for advancing libertarianism? Sam, would you like to start us off?
I'm sorry, I had myself muted. Yeah, best strategies for advancing libertarianism. Really, what you see right now is a fantastic opportunity for that in the United States. You have a government that is acting like governments do, only because of the situation, it's up there and visible to everybody. You have a bunch of people who are basically wondering what's going on and seeing this government abuse the opportunity and leave them behind. And now is a great time to start talking to people. I mean, we can do that. That's one of the things that we're doing here. I'm sure that not everybody listening to this roundtable is a libertarian. I wouldn't assume that. I wouldn't assume that the people that we meet on the street as we go out for our allowed walks these days are libertarians. The people that we encounter online, at least in my sense, from what I've seen, there's a lot of non-libertarians out there, but we can expose them to those ideas. We can do that using social media. We can do that using opportunities like this. We can do that using the media once we have a nominee and the opportunity to get out there and start making some noise. But the important thing here is to get people to look at their situation and understand that they are more libertarian than they ever thought. Gary Johnson used to say that everybody's a libertarian, they just haven't realized it yet. That's what we need to do, is help people to realize that. Just in the course of talking to some of the other nominees and folks that are running for the nomination in the Libertarian Party, there are plenty of stories of people, hey, Vermin Supreme and Spike out there talking on college campuses, Dan Berman talking to random people, myself, number of times when I've just, hey, why are you in town for? Talk to an Uber driver. Oh, I'm here for the Libertarian convention. Oh, what's that? And you explain it to them, and they're like, wow, libertarianism compared to what the Democrats are offering now, compared to what the Republicans are offering now, the libertarian message, the libertarian ideals, the libertarian principles sound really, really good. We are the adults in the room. And that there is no doubt about that. This election season, we are the adults in the room. If we can act like it, if we can get out there and talk to people, if we can connect with people, if we can get these ideas percolating, I have no doubt that we will see a great awakening of libertarianism in this country.
All right. Same question to Adam.
If we are going to achieve significant libertarian change through the political process, it's going to necessitate building broad-based consensus, obviously. And if we believe in specialization of labor, we have to also believe in specialization of leadership. And our transition to a freer society cannot be dependent on, well, we need to get everybody to read a bunch of books about economics and philosophy, and if you don't know who Murray Rothbard is, well, screw you, you're not a real libertarian, or even just asking people to have that deeper intellectual appreciation. What we need to be able to do is take our base, which is right now maybe 1 or 2% of the population, and first build that up to, maybe 10%, but accept that it's probably never going to get more than that. But that's enough that if we apply this concept of specialization in leadership, instead of saying, we have to get you all to agree with us and understand everything. No, look, all we have to do is create practical policy that everybody can immediately see makes their lives better and fundamentally moves us in a greater direction towards freedom. So localization is the best thing that I've ever heard. That's why that's the basis of my presidential campaign, to say, take the federal government through a bankruptcy process, a peaceful, orderly, responsible one that leaves us with 50 independent states and up to 562 sovereign native nations. And then we can get people to vote for radical libertarian policy, in a sense, without even knowing it. All they have to know is, okay, if government is localized, I get more of what I want right away. My government is more transparent, more accountable, more customized. I get a system based on my values set up to meet my needs rather than the needs of politicians who live in some far-off capital. That's how we build that broader consensus beyond just spreading these ideas. I think there are a lot of challenges that we run into. If you think, well, we have to wake up everybody, you're going to be really disappointed going out. And I still believe every human being's a libertarian. They just don't know it yet. But if the point of libertarianism is to minimize government's role in our lives, guess what? Everybody on this show right now, everybody listening right now, we're screwing it up because we're talking about government a lot. And in a sense, you'd have to respect someone who just says, yeah, I live out in the woods and I don't pay taxes and I minimize government's role in my life, or I found a way to get paid under the table and operate in a way where government doesn't really affect me. And I don't even talk about it. I just live a fun, awesome life. Is that guy more libertarian than me? Maybe he is. Just because he has all these ideas and knowledge and understanding, at least in that lifestyle sense, I would rather live in a world where people live libertarian values rather than understand them. And I think obviously those things go hand in hand. It's not as cut and dry as that. So we have to create a way to make it really easy for people to engage and help move in that direction. And it's practical policy that immediately improves everyone's lives. I think localization is the best way to do that in a radical way that avoids arguing issue by issue and playing their game of politics. We can go out and say, hey, you want to live in a liberal community? Cool. You want to live in a conservative community? Cool. I want everybody to get what they want.
All right. Same question for Keith. What do you think is the best strategy for advancing libertarianism?
Well, Lou Rockwell made a great point when he said, should we try to educate everyone on Austrian economics, agricultural subsidies, education, the welfare state, or should we kind of teach them something they learned in kindergarten and get them to apply it consistently? I think it's all about getting into the ideas that people already believe and sort of coming up with a quick elevator pitch to explain the principle behind those ideas. So when someone says, my body, my choice, well, what they it's so ironic. The one time they mention that it involves, sucking out a fetus and killing it. But the point is when someone says my body, my choice, what they're kind of saying is with regards to other people, the person who directly controls the body has the better claim to it. Even though you might hate that I watch 10 episodes of Everybody Loves Raymond in a row and I spend too much money on Jägermeister, hey, I have a better claim to my body than you do. I have the right to contract with anyone I please on whatever terms I'd like. You can also take things like, when when you have to apply things consistently. When someone says, Trump is the worst, he is Hitler light, he's a racist and a sexist and all this stuff, and you can say, well, how come you were more worried about Trump today than you were 20 years ago? Because today, he's the president serving us, and 20 years ago, he was a billionaire in the predatory private sector that represents no one, and businesses just exist to rip him off. People pretty much know that government is the thing that psychopaths occupy to violently dominate other people, and even good people end up doing bad things when they get the power of the state. So you have real world examples of refuting the idea. Well, there'd be predatory private sector monopolies, so we need government. I mean, are you more afraid of Trump today or than you were 20 years ago? It's so in your face obvious that it's just about changing the popular opinion on what the state is. And even though it looks rough when people are constantly begging for the state, in 1960, I think Murray Rothbard told Walter Block, "There's probably like 5 or 10 of us on the entire planet. There's probably so few people who understand anarchism. No one has the right to rule, and capitalism. People have the right to acquire property and trade voluntarily." But much like what Adam was saying previously, I don't think there is a central plan on how to achieve freedom. I think Jacob Hornberger and Adam running for president is great. I like people making YouTube videos. I like people doing man on the street. I like people just living in the woods and setting an example for all of us. And I also think sort of being humble towards people really shows a side of libertarianism that they don't see. So what I've started doing is I've saying, look, I might be totally wrong about this whole libertarianism thing. So in order, here's how you could falsify my ideology. Please explain to me why one group, the state, has a monopoly right to initiate violence and morality applies differently to them. Or explain why it's not violence at all when the government does it. But then you'd have to explain why government can pass legislation that no other group has the right to pass. Everyone else, it would be seen as terrorism. Or you could just take it from the economic view. When is a coercively funded monopoly better at producing lower price and higher quality than voluntarily funded competition? Those are really your two choices. So I think having an elevator pitch telling people, hey, I'm open to this being wrong, I don't think you can refute it because statism is a contradiction. This group has rights no one else has because of a contract that doesn't exist. That is statism, and it's so obviously false that I'm a long-term optimist, but still a short-term pessimist. Sometimes that is my view on the thing.
All right. And I believe the last one we have left is Stefan. Is that right?
Yes, that is how you pronounce it. Yes.
He would use the against me argument as he articulated so well back in 2009 at the New Hampshire Liberty Forum.
No, listen, there's too much of a time flash for me, man. Can't do it. Can't do it. Speak into my good ears, sonny. Well, the against me argument, you should look it up. I won't reiterate it here, but I will also say that we have to be right and we kind of have to be a little cold. In other words, we have to be right about things going badly, and they are. and they're probably going to get a whole lot worse. And there are people, we have given them the moral responsibility of talking to them. So I'm probably older than people on here, so I've been talking about this with people for 35 years. Good Lord, 35 years.
And you haven't achieved the complete abolition of the state yet? What have you been doing all this time?
I certainly have in my household.
Thank you for your service, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, no. So 35 years,
Yes,
man.
here.
That's like if my activism was a female, it would be like 3 times older than someone that Roman Polanski would be interested in. Like that's how old my activism is. My activism is losing eggs like a shaken chicken. But anyway, so I've given by now literally millions of people the moral responsibility of hearing the truth historically, the truth morally, the truth epistemologically, the truth consequentially, and so I have given people this flaming hot potato called free will and moral responsibility. Now, a lot of people have supported what I do, and a lot of people have helped me expand and achieve what it is that I'm doing, and that's great. And to those people, eternal love and gratitude and humble appreciation and so on. For the other people, well, they have the responsibility of having rejected the truth. And there are consequences to rejecting the truth. Like if somebody says to you, hey man, smoking a pack a day is bad for you, and you call them paranoid, weird, creepy conspiracy theorists and so on, or cult leaders and so on, then what happens is when you get sick, you are responsible for that. And, I do what I do because I love the world, I love people, and I want them to not experience the horrors that will assuredly come if they keep rejecting the truth and they keep rejecting reason, evidence, morality, all that kind of stuff. Philosophy, really, I suppose. I love them and I want to save them. And that's my New Testament side, I guess you could say, but I have an Old Testament side as well. And my Old Testament side is the wages of sin is death. We know, very frankly, very deeply, very powerfully, that if socialism takes over, if communism takes over, tens of millions of people are going to die. They're going to die from starvation. They're going to die from lack of health care. They're going to die. They're going to die from gulags and shootings and mass graves. Everything that happens when these psychotic sons of bitches get into power. Now, all I can do, I think all we can do, I don't want to speak for other people, I'll just speak for myself. So all I can do is expend every reasonable amount of mental effort, take every reasonable amount of risk in society to get the word out to people about what's coming. If they don't wake up, fight for their freedoms, fight for what's right, and change. You're trying to shake people out of being hypnotized by that car snake of the mainstream media and Hollywood and academia and all that kind of stuff. And when people have facts, and there never has been as much moral responsibility in the world ever as there is now, because now the facts, the reality, the truth, like that old Stone song, it's just a click away, right? It's just a click away. It's right there on your phone. The facts, the truth, the reality, your salvation is literally in your pocket at all times. So people are now completely and totally morally responsible. I hope that they choose wisely, and I do everything that I can, pull every trick in the book to keep people interested in the truth, to make it entertaining, to make it enjoyable, to make it engaging. I do everything that I can. And it's fundamentally their choice to listen or not. Now, if they do listen, and if more and more people wake up, fantastic, we can avert what has come. But if they don't, for me, at least, just as a sort of sanity, self-preservation measure, I got to harden my heart. I have to, because you give people the choice, and you have to let them live with the consequences. And if things do turn into some absolute clusterfrack of a Venezuelan shit sandwich, people will cry victim. They will complain. I mean, look at the coronavirus. We have been warning people about China, communism. I did an interview almost a decade ago with Gordon Chang about the growing danger of China. We have been warning people. We have been telling people that it is a really, really dangerous situation over there. And people are like, yeah, okay, but it's, $12 off my TV. It's like, okay. I don't really think that's a good deal when you end up losing your job for 6 months or whatever. But I think that we do have to be frank about what's coming for people if they don't listen. It is going to be the destruction of everything they hold dear, and quite likely of themselves as well. Especially if they've been out. Like, here's the thing too, like on social media now, what I said to that Marxist, like, he's like, well, why would anyone have a problem with you? It's like, dude, they can read. I mean, the Marxists, the socialists, they can read. They know how much we're opposing what it is that they do, and they gain power. Man, we're going to be staring into a ditch, making our peace with the end of time. And so I do take it very personally when people don't listen. And of course, I'm not going to go out there and force people to listen or make people listen, because I'm a non-aggression principle kind of guy. But, it's that Atlas Shrugged situation. At some point, people are going to earn their own fate. And so I think we do have to be right. We do have to be winning. We do have to show people the upside. But there is a significant freaking downside here that is getting much, much closer and much faster in a way than I think any of us anticipated, certainly than I anticipated. And it's okay. If you want people to quit smoking, it's fine to show them, look, I don't smoke and I can run up a hill 3 times, and look, I can play squash and tennis and so on. But it's also okay to show somebody choking out on emphysema, right? And smoking through a hole in their throat and writing their will as the cancer takes them. And I do think that we need to be very, very frank about the predictions. We're not just leading people to heaven. We're trying to drag them away from hell. And it will be hell. And it will be a perhaps permanent hell, because the free market has given so many silence and dominance mechanisms to the state that it might go on for a long, long, long time. Effectively forever for anybody who's alive. And so I think we need to be frank about all the good things that come out of freedom. But I think we also need to be pretty frank about what's going to happen to people in a state of tyranny. And it is going to be a short, ugly, brutal, painful existence. I mean, just read the Gulag Archipelago for more on that. And if they continue to choose slavery, if they continue to choose avoidance, if they continue to be fundamentally moral cowards in the most essential issues of this or any other time, then, I'm afraid we have to get out and not look back.
All right.
Hey, Tim, do you mind if I jump in and ask Stefan a follow-up there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
So there were a couple things. There's a lot in there. I generally agree with the gist of it, except, as the Jew in the room, I got to say, I'm all New Testament here as a libertarian. I think, opening our hearts, being
You
more
are a terrible
empathetic.
Jew. You are a
Yeah,
terrible
I
Jew.
know,
I'm so sorry, man.
Oh,
Like you got to go start from scratch, man. That's it.
Oh, that's the least of my Jewish transgressions. But we'll just leave it at that for now. No, but Stefan, one of the things you said was that things are getting worse, and you have this general perspective that humanity could go one way or another, to greater freedom or complete tyranny. And I understand there are 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards in this process. And I would agree with you if you're looking at the short term. If you're looking at Donald Trump, yeah, things are going to get a lot worse, especially in the wake of this coronaphobia crisis. And I think anybody who voted for Donald Trump or supported him kind of has, well, as you would say, that Old Testament responsibility for it. I don't disagree with that.
Well, do we really want to get into Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton?
Versus Gary Johnson, but that's the difference. No, I do want to put you on the spot on something that's a bigger question here, Stefan. I got to get that jab about Trump in there, of course, but that humanity progresses, and I'm a big advocate of libertarians looking at the work of Professor Steven Pinker, Harvard professor who wrote Better Angels of Our Nature, did a couple great TED Talks on that subject, that human violence is declining over time. And I think if you have faith in the message of freedom itself, if you have faith in capitalism and markets progressing, and that good ideas beat bad ideas out of a pragmatic sense, that they outcompete in the market, humanity gets less violent over time. We may be in the middle of a big step backwards of modern bureaucratic governments, where we see a huge part of our lives controlled and dominated by coercion, but you still can't refute his, core academic assertion. You can argue with his interpretations for sure, and he puts forth those as theories and whatnot. But the one thing that I don't think you can argue with is that we are getting less violent over time. We are living in the most peaceful times in human history. You are less likely to be subject to violence at the hands of another human being today than ever before. And I think, Stefan, as an empiricist, you would have to look at this and say, well, is it getting better or getting worse? And unless you want to assert that over the course of humanity, it's been level and obviously jagged line back and forth, but more or less level. And we could go either way with this. We could go to total tyranny or total freedom. Okay, maybe. I think it's much more likely that we have at least some form of evolutionary or at least market progress as a core element of human progress here, no?
Well, there's a lot of what you said there too, Adam, and I respect the opinion, I really do, and it's tempting. You are, of course, half naked, holding out an apple with a snake at your back, and I don't get me wrong, I'm tempted. Those are some serious abs you got going on there, and I can't believe it didn't come with my Libertarian card, but that's all right. But no, listen, the world only looks peaceful if you forget that debt is violence, right? So
Sure.
we don't have peace in our society. We have intergenerational debt and bribe compliance, right? So if you think that the world is peaceful, try not sending out the welfare checks, man. You would have Mad Max beyond the Thunderdome in about 12 seconds. So the reality is, and this is a bit of a dad card, so I'm sort of annoying. I get it's annoying to play it, but I'll play it because it's kind of true for me. That if I look at my daughter, who's born into hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, she's going to be, kind of a slave that way, right? So if you say, well, I'm going to live off credit cards for like 3 months, right? I'm just going to pay the minimum, or 6 months or whatever. And you say, wow, I don't know why I worked all those years or whatever. It's like, well, you're just living off debt. You're just deferring and making worse the problems that you have. And so every human life on this planet is sustained by $30,000 of debt. So the idea that we're living in a peaceful time is like some guy thinking that work is a fool's game because he's living on debt. Well, it's not a peaceful time. If you remember debt, you will remember that the enslavement is very soft and it's very subtle, which makes it very, very hard to fight. And once we remember that debt, particularly intergenerational debt, is a form of violence, then, which, Steven Pinker is never going to see that. The guy lives on state funding to some degree anyway, so he's not going to see that, right? So I don't share that optimism about the state of the world. It's sort of like saying, well, if I pay off the guy who's threatening to beat me up every week, my world is peaceful. It's like, well, no, you're not. And we're just paying people to not riot, and the money's running out.
Hey, do you think we could hear Sam and Keith and
Yeah.
your take on this, Tim? I think this is a huge under-examined question in libertarianism.
Sam, would you like to chime in on this?
Okay, I've been listening, and I have wandered so far listening to this that I've lost the original question. So, could you
Well,
refresh
just
me for me?
the core question of what I'm interjecting here with is it getting better or worse? Are we getting more or less free over time, more or less violent or peaceful? And do you have a clear projection of where this is going over the long term? Is freedom inevitable? I don't think any of us would be here if we believed that tyranny was absolutely inevitable. But I think we all have to look at this historical perspective and ask ourselves, what do these dynamics and trends suggest?
In all honesty, you've heard me talking my standard pitch when I get up and people say, "Why are you running for president?" Well, the country's getting worse. We're headed in the wrong direction, and I don't mean by that we decided to veer off and head for the wrong burger place, and we should be headed for the nicer one down the street. We are headed for the cliff. We're headed for the waterfall, and basically at this point, with the Republicans and the Democrats and the leadership we have in this country, the only decision that seems to be made, depending on who's in power, is how fast we're stomping on that accelerator. I think as Americans, as libertarians, as lovers of freedom, it is our responsibility and our moral duty to do everything we can to reverse course. Now, can we do so? I pray so. That's what I'm working for, and that's what I want to work towards. You can look at this and say and count this as this past year as my awakening to the idea that no, it's not getting better. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm running. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I want people to wake up and see that as well, because I don't think that we are going to turn it around, like you said, with 1 or 2% of the population. We need to get 5%, 10%, 15%. We need to get a majority working to move this country in the direction of freedom consciously, because the alternative is to simply keep going with the flow and end up going over that cliff, end up going over that waterfall, and neither one of those is a good result, because after that, what you have is wreckage, what you have is ruin, and from there, you're not talking about saving a people or saving a country or doing a search and rescue and getting people out of their mindset that the government is necessary in order for them to live their lives. What you're doing is having to rebuild, and along the way of getting there, of getting to the point that you can rebuild, people are going to die. People are going to hurt, families are going to be shattered, lives are going to be ruined, and whether that happens immediately as a result of a collapse, whether that happens 20, 40, 50, 60 years down the road, when our descendants finally have the guts to stand up to a government that controls every aspect of their lives, it's gonna be painful. So our choice right now is to fight as best we can, or to close our eyes, lay back, and just let it happen. And I'm not willing to do that.
All right, and Keith, same question to you. As I understood it, Adam, it was two parts you were getting at here. You know, is as far as the world in general, but also I guess the case for freedom. Are things getting better or worse? Is that right?
Gosh, it's so hard to measure. One of the things that scares me is what used to be the hurdles to one group of people monopolizing tyranny and being seen as the sole arbiter of justice. Is it right or wrong to do? Well, hold on. What does government say the law is? You used to kind of have a little more, well, my parents told me this. Well, my community told me this. Well, my church told me this. With a lot of modern technology today, it seems like, God, parents are constantly being bashed on TV. It's just inherently cool to do the opposite of what, you know, the established idea is, whether it's right or wrong. So I'm worried that some of those hurdles to tyranny, the church, the family, the parents, the community, the friendship, I'm worried that some of those are really being taken away, and people are saying, well, what's the right thing to do? I don't know. What does the psychopathic, theft funded, kidnapping government say to do? That is one thing that I'm worried about. However, I think a lot of people are operationally understanding the difference between operationally getting something and intellectually getting something. I think that a lot of peace today is the result of operational choice. I don't think there was, some great intellectual movement behind, stopping the terrible atrocities of history. The one that I've spent some time focusing on is the draft, which is enslavement to fight wars based on lies under the worst conditions you could imagine possible, getting your hands and limbs blown off and dying with PTSD while the VA's in charge of taking care of you if you manage to get back home. So when you see something like the draft going away, it's definitely a win operationally, but morally, I don't know if we're necessarily winning on that side. But developing a further opinion, I'd have to do more research. Those are just some things that come to mind. I'm not taking necessarily one side or the other.
So normally,
if I may, just as a quick follow up there, Keith, I really appreciate that thing you just said there at the end, and I would really encourage everybody who's listening to ask themselves that bigger question. I think when you have that foundation, it really answers a lot of questions for yourself and your own role as a libertarian, as an ethical human being, and an activist trying to make the world a better place. And check out the work of Steven Pinker. I would say start with his TED Talk, The Surprising Decline in Violence.
So I rarely put myself into this, but you asked, and I actually have a lot of thoughts on this. So I'll try to be brief here. I generally think so. I'm seeing two things here, like the world in general, as far as, for example, violence, and then also freedom. As far as violence, I think that the world has certainly become better. I think Pinker makes a really good point there. Built in that, though, I think Stefan is right that you have to basically, for argument's sake, say, okay, violations of non-aggression principle don't count as violence. And I do think that seems to be a bit of an issue. But even with that, I do think the world in general is getting to be a better place. But humans have a very short memory, and I mean, I have a degree in history, and what, if anything, it's taught me is that we're always on the precipice of a collapse. Like societies have collapsed so many times, whether due to internal strife, supply systems collapsing. The whole Bronze Age world collapsed because of an issue with supply systems, really. And I could go through a million examples. We have a short memory, and it's been termed Pax Americana, like since the end of World War II, when most countries were afraid to do crazy things because, hey, these crazy excuse me, I'm trying not to swear. These crazy guys just dropped a nuke. We don't want to mess with that. We in the grand scope of world history been living in a time of peace, but the idea that we're not just one step away from everything going so horribly. I mean, look at all the stuff that we've got. That I don't know. I feel like we're just a moment away at any time from something going horribly bad. And I think it's true what Stefan was saying. With coronavirus, it kind of opens a scary eye here that our government has raised so much debt, and if the government wasn't able to make welfare payments or other payments to people, I think a lot of things would go crazy. We've seen rioting in the streets after things like Trayvon Martin's death. I think that is just like a glint in the milkman's eye of what we might see if our current system were to actually be unable to make payments for a few months. But as far as freedom itself, I'm a lot more hopeful here. I know in the West we've had a bit of a slow encroachment of government, especially as far as taxes go. But on a lot of other issues in the West, things like gun rights, for example, we've never had more secure gun rights in America in all of our history, even though we have had scale backs here. In the broad picture, I think it's now 26 states where you have a constitutional right to carry, and I think it was like 30 years ago, only Vermont recognized that. Like the smallest state in the union recognized it, but now it's half the union. And if you look at the broader world, I do think in the broader world there are movements towards a more free world. It's not so much in the West; it's in Latin America, Asia, and Africa. Very slowly, they're becoming more capitalistic. There's more economic freedom, but also there's a lot more social freedoms encroaching. And I think that's obviously a great thing.
All right. Do we want to go around? Is there a closing topic you wanted us to do now that we're at 2 hours?
So yeah, we're at 2 hours. There's one topic I had left in mind. I don't know if you have like another 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, I do.
Adam, I know you had some
I'm afraid I don't, but if there's another topic, I'm happy to go first. And I hate to be Mr. Jump and Run, but I do have something else after this. So I'd schedule for 9. So if we want to do another topic, if you don't mind if I go first, that would be great.
Okay, yeah. If you could give us your thoughts on abortion. Is abortion, like the libertarian position on abortion, is it pro-life?
No, that's
pro-choice?
asking for it to go another hour. Really? Let's
Another
do
hour
a
would be.
libertarian
Oh, come
lightning
on.
round on abortion.
Look.
Okay.
First of all, Adam clearly wants to abort the entire conversation. That is coming through. It's coming through clearly. Oh, I can give you 2 minutes on abortion. So abortion is clearly a tragedy. It is clearly something we would rather have less of to none of in society. So the first question is, why is abortion so prevalent? Well, the answer generally is because sexual morality has decayed in the presence of the welfare state. Because in the past, if a woman got knocked up and a man wouldn't marry her, then her parents would generally have to foot the bill for taking care of her child, or, assuming she didn't have an abortion, or she'd maybe give it up for adoption and so on. And so what happens now, of course, is a woman who gets knocked up, but the man runs off. The parents don't have to worry about either paying for the abortion or paying for raising the child or anything like that. And so she turns from, if she keeps the child, she turns from somebody who net costs the people around her directly to somebody who gets paid, so to speak, right? I mean, turning children from a liability to an asset has been a complete fundamental reversal of everything that we evolved to deal with as human beings. So of course, it's really twisted up society as a whole. So parents have much less incentive to patrol the sexuality of unmarried men, unmarried women in this particular case. Without the welfare state, then people will be more responsible sexually. The prevalence of abortion will go down. Now, the problem with abortion, of course, and fundamentally, is that if you say that the woman has to carry the child to term, then the woman is going to be enslaved to carrying that child. In other words, you will throw her in jail if she has the abortion and so on. So she's forced to carry the child. And we certainly do recognize that the woman, as the mother, has a right that supersedes that of the fetus, in that if there is a conflict, then only one can survive. In general, we will say that the mother should survive if she wants to, and the child will be, or the fetus will be sacrificed. So right now, you look at the prevalence of abortion, you say this is a massive problem in society. In the same way, you go back 150 years, you look at the prevalence of smallpox in society, you say, oh my gosh, that's a huge, huge issue. But we have an inoculation against wildly irresponsible sexual activity, which can result in abortion and is really the result of, is a vast majority of abortions result from irresponsibility, not from rape or incest or anything like that. So the first thing we want to do is get abortion down to a manageable size, because right now, the moral horror of abortion, it being subsidized in various ways from here to eternity, is so great that the emotions are so strong. If we can get abortion down to maybe 2 or 3% of what it is right now, which you could do simply in a free society by not having a welfare state, then you could have decisions and discussions about it that would be a lot less ramped up. I do not feel comfortable saying to a woman who's the victim of a brutal rape that she has to carry the child to the rapist. That seems to me further traumatizing a woman who's already been traumatized, and that is a huge mess. I don't feel comfortable with that. I don't feel comfortable with the woman who doesn't take the unprotected sex, just giving her abortion after abortion. That seems to me entirely wrong and degraded and bad for everyone involved, especially, of course, the children who don't come to be. So I think that if you look at the prevalence of violent rape, and how many women have to face choices of abortion based on that, it's like 1% of the population. Oh, sorry, of abortions, not even the population as a whole. So I would say if we can eliminate the welfare state, you're going to reduce abortion down to 1%, where we can haggle about, okay, what level of violence and so on, right? And so I would, in general, like to reduce the problem to a manageable area. And then what we do is we say, okay, how many resources do we want to expend discussing the ethics of something that is so rare? And that, to me, is a big change. If abortion remains at its current level, then it clearly is a huge moral issue, because if it is a human life that you're destroying, which technically it is, then the fetus would be covered under the non-aggression principle. And the number of abortions, 50 million in America since Roe v. Wade, has been kind of like a genocide of the unborn. So the point is, in a free society, abortions would be much, much more rare. And we could tamp it down to the point where we could have discussions about it without these endless parade of tiny ghosts passing by when everyone's talking about it. And then we really can't have a rational discussion, because, again, if it is a human life, which it is, then it is a horrifying thing that's happening in society. If it is, my body, my choice, and you get rid of it like you would cut off a toenail, that is morally horrible to the people who believe and understand that it is a human life. And you can't meet in the middle when there's this level of extremity. Get the number of abortions down, and I think the conversation gets a lot less heated, and of course, a lot more babies. Like if you could go to the people who are pro-life and say, listen, we can save 95%, 90%, 99% of these babies, they'd be like, hey, man, that's fantastic. And that's exactly what a free society will do.
All right, so I know you got to run, but I really appreciate you coming on, Stefan. Always
Thanks,
great to
man.
have you, man.
Really great to chat with everyone. Let's do it again more often. It's been too long to hear these great words of wisdom.
Yeah, I'd love to just set one of these up again. Thanks
Hey,
again.
Steph, where should I send you those videos? Twitter or email?
Operations@freedomain.com.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Thanks, man. Take care.
All right, Adam, I know that you also said you have something you want to, would you like to give us your quick elevator speech on abortion?
Whatever your philosophical, ethical position on abortion might be, we all need to come to agreement that government should have nothing to do with it. The unintended consequences of government involvement in any issue are so severe that in the case of abortion, if you really set government towards minimizing or eliminating abortion as a thing, within a year, men would be having them. And if you said, government, you need to make sure that abortions are freely available to everyone, I'm afraid that I might be forced to bear children myself so that the state can raise them to grow up and be abortion doctors. Both of those are horrific outcomes that we need to avoid. And with that, I will sign off and say thank you all very much for listening. Thank you for including me in this conversation. My main website is thefreedomline.com. And if anybody wants to follow up, adam@thefreedomline.com. Peace and love, y'all.
All right.
Take care, Adam. Pleasure as always.
Adam, really appreciate it. All right, Keith, what are your thoughts on this?
This was definitely one of those that looking into it and seeing the videos of the actual operation occurring, I went from sort of indifferent to, oh my God, this needs to end permanently. What do I do to make this my number one priority to stop? Also, hearing the arguments of the organization Live Action really turned me onto the pro-life position. So I would say I want a system where the fewest will occur, and I want to create the incentives to do so. So I want a totally free market where people can access things like birth control and condoms more accessibly. That drastically increases the likelihood that they will use them. As sex ed has been taught in school, I don't know if this is a correlation causation thing, but the more sex ed, the more sex kids have, the more abortions occur. That is according to the work of Thomas Sowell. I think not having giving people the option to opt out of sending their kids to an education like that is another step in the right direction. Of course, when people are more free, they'll have more options, more prophylactics to choose from. They'll be they'll be much cheaper because there will be more competition with fewer bars to entry into the marketplace. So my position is against. However, of course, it is difficult to implement. Quick, she's performing an abortion. Shoot her. Whereas you could shoot, someone running at you with an axe. So that's rough. So I do think it is a terrible thing, and I do consider it a life. I believe by people en masse embracing libertarian principles, we'll have a world where there are the fewest of these. Because again, there's no welfare state where people can say, well, I have a kid, therefore the state's going to pay me for each extra child, and Planned Parenthood pays the $600 for the procedure. So that is my position on it. I misspoke. I actually do have to go, but I really appreciate you making me part of this. Sam, pleasure to meet you. I will check out your presidential run. And if anyone wants to check out my work, check out the Case for Anarchism on the Keith Knight Don't Tread on Anyone channel. Appreciate it, gentlemen. Take care.
All right, thanks for coming, Keith. Greatly appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, and if you'd like to give us our final words here, Sam, what are your thoughts on abortion?
this is interesting. Running for the Libertarian nomination started a little over a year, about a year ago, and for 11 months, this topic never came up. And it seems like the elephant in the room is starting to get noticed. I am a pro-life libertarian. That is a possible position in the spectrum of libertarianism. If you disagree with that, I'm going to say flat out you're wrong, because the argument here is not whether murder is wrong or right. We agree that violence against someone, directed against someone, is wrong. The question is whether or not a fetus, an unborn child, is a person or not. And I think the answer to that question, it lies in biology, it lies in embryology, it lies in medicine, and the answer is that yes, life begins at conception, and that you have a distinct individual, distinct DNA, separate from mother and father, and that, when you have a fertilized egg, it begins to multiply, it begins to grow. So you obviously have a distinct individual, you have life, you have development, and it is happening in the only place that we know that can happen. Whether you want to admit it or not, the universe does not care whether you experience pleasure or not in sexual intercourse. The goal there is to make another human being. That is the purpose of it. So when you engage in intercourse, you are saying, hey, I'm bearing the risk here. I may incur the awesome responsibility of creating a life. And that goes for the mother, that goes for the father. And when that happens, it's not a surprise. That's something that is intended by your actions. And that life that comes into existence did not ask to be created. That life that comes into existence did not petition and say, "Hey, I'd like to be here. I'd like to develop here." That is a responsibility of the parents. And I would love to see abortion completely eliminated. I would love to see Planned Parenthood defunded. I would love to see a change in our society where we, instead of funding abortion clinics, instead of funding the murder of children in the womb, we would put that money towards post-birth services and say, hey, you know what? You are in this situation. We are here for you. We're not going to scare you. We're not going to tell you that you are not strong enough to have a child. We're not going to tell you that you're not brave enough to have a child. We're not going to tell you that having this child is going to ruin your life. We're going to tell you that we are here for you and for your child. And when that baby is born, if you cannot accept the responsibility of it, we have people who will, because that life is precious. I would love to see that happen. There are only two instances where I believe that abortion is even justified in considering. That would be, as mentioned before, cases of rape, right? Because in that case, consent is not there. The mother did not consent. That means that yes, they need to be given a choice. They did not make the choice to engage in intercourse, so they actually have a choice there about whether or not to continue that pregnancy. I know I have met through the internet and in person a number of people who have elected to, even though they were raped, they elected to carry the child because they understood that individual was not present even at the time that they were violated, that individual had nothing to do, that their child had nothing to do with the situation, that they were as much a victim as they were. I would love to see society get to the point where every child is valued wherever they come from, however they were born. And the only other instance where I think that abortion is justified is when it is an actual medical procedure. When you are in a situation where you have a life or death decision between mother and child, where you have to say, you know what, this is risky. Mother, you may die. Child, you can't talk to the child. the decision at that point has to be up to the mother. Those are the two situations I support. And for those who are thinking, oh, so you think the purpose of the state is to protect life, so you would have a mother prosecuted for abortion? No, I would have the abortionist prosecuted for murder. They're the ones who perform the act. Mothers, in a lot of cases, like I mentioned, find themselves going into that situation, seeking an abortion, not because they feel empowered, but because they feel afraid, because they feel unqualified. And the answer to that is to support them, not to convince them that their babies need to be murdered. So that's me. I'm a pro-life libertarian. One of the things I do respect in the Libertarian Party is, like I said, this seems to have been, I think, 4 times this week I've talked to individuals or talked to on broadcast about my point of view on abortion. One of the things I do respect in the Libertarian Party is that we can have this difficult discussion. You don't get this on the Republican Party. You don't get this in the Democrat Party. You do not get people willing to come together and talk about difficult issues like this. What you get is basically bumper sticker politics, bumper sticker theology. So I'm very grateful, and I honestly respect, and I've had very meaningful conversations, very deep, trying to wrestle with this problem conversations with anarchists that are concerned with the balance between okay, yes, we have a life, but what about the mother's autonomy, right? And it's always amazing to me, as a pro-life libertarian, as being someone who is kind of in the minority, when I'm at a convention or where I'm talking to people, if somebody comes up and goes, "So, I hear you're pro-life. Could you explain where you're coming from on that? Because it doesn't make sense to me." That is so different in the Libertarian Party. That willingness to tackle these issues and to talk about them and to try and understand each other's point of view, even if they seem to be irreconcilable, makes the party entirely worth it for me. That's why I'm here. Why I'm a libertarian. I'm pro-life. I hope that if you're not, that I could convince you someday that you should be. But I honestly can't lie about where I stand. I think abortion is murder. I think that children should be protected and nurtured, and that's what civilized societies do. That's what compassionate and caring people do. And we are, as Americans, civilized, compassionate, caring people. That's where we should be.
All right. Sam, thank you so much for coming out. Really appreciate it, and look forward to hopefully having you on again.
Thank you, sir.
All right, guys. So that concludes.
Just like to point out
go ahead.
while we're doing this, I'd like to say my website is samrob2020.com. From there, the individuals who are telling me that I can't be a pro-life libertarian, you are absolutely wrong. And you can actually go to my merchandise side of the website and buy a T-shirt that says 0 days since the Libertarian Purity Police have told me that I am not a libertarian. I am a libertarian. I care about life. Thank you.
All right. So that concludes our roundtable here, guys. Thanks to everyone for coming out. I really enjoyed this event. I hope that you guys did. Stay tuned. We've got more coming. We hope to have all these guys on and more again in the future for another roundtable. This Sunday, we're having Dr. Jamie Goodall on, pirate historian, and Tuesday we're having Vermin Supreme on. And we are, because I know a lot of people here, I am not one, but I know a lot of people here are not libertarians and are more of a leftist persuasion. We are working on a communist roundtable. So far, if I remember right, Zexacy and Vosh said they could go. Guccian, we might have to reschedule for Guccian to be able to go, and we're looking at bringing in a few more people. If there are some communists that you think would be great for a communist roundtable, please just DM me, and I will try to reach out to them. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can join us here, discord.gg/bluepolitics.